She called me mid-presentation to say she was pregnant but not with my child. Don't bother coming back, she said coldly. I said all right and went back to the boardroom. 3 days later, her bank account showed insufficient funds when the December snow fell silently outside the gleaming glass windows of Argentel's Berlin headquarters as I delivered the final points of my presentation. 32 pairs of eyes focused on me, the culmination of 18 months of work hanging on my every word. The $400 million acquisition would transform Caldwell Strategic Holdings from a respected New York investment firm into a global powerhouse. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession, Kim. My wife never called during presentations. 7 years of marriage had established our rhythms, our unspoken rules. Something was wrong. Excuse me, I said to the room of executives. 2 minutes to review the projections on page 18. I'll be right back. I stepped onto the glass-enclosed balcony, the bitter cold instantly cutting through my suit. Berlin's skyline stretched out before me, twinkling like fallen stars against the darkening winter sky. Kim. I answered, my breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Her voice came through with unsettling clarity. Flat, emotionless, rehearsed. Aaron, I've left everything behind. I'm pregnant, but it's not yours. It's Miles. I've sold the house, sold the car. Don't bother coming home. I said nothing. The silence stretched between New York and Berlin like an abyss. Goodbye, Aaron. No tremor in her voice, no hesitation. The call ended. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned to the boardroom, my face a perfect mask of professional composure. Now, as I was saying about the projected market integration, I finished the presentation flawlessly. Hands were shaken, terms agreed upon, a memorandum of understanding signed. Only then did I excuse myself to the restroom, lock the door, and stare at my reflection in the mirror. No tears came. No rage erupted. Only a cold, calculated thought crystallized in my mind. This isn't the end. This is just the opening move in a new game. I made 3 calls in quick succession. First to Henry Langton, my personal attorney. Block any transactions involving assets under my name. Check for forged signatures or unauthorized transfers. Next to Erica Sloan, my financial advisor. Freeze all joint accounts immediately, but make it look like a technical banking issue. Nothing traceable to me. Finally, an urgent email to our IT department requesting complete access logs for my home office systems and personal emails. I needed to know if Kim had been mining company information. As I waited for responses, I mentally cataloged the warning signs I'd missed. Kim suddenly wearing makeup, even when home alone. Her irritation whenever I announced business trips. Late-night text messages she'd quickly delete. Her recent philosophical musings about freedom from constraints and living authentically. Never once had I imagined she could betray me so completely. Not just an affair that would have been almost quaint by comparison. This was calculated destruction, executed with the precision of a corporate takeover. That night I stood on the balcony of my suite at the Waldorf Astoria, 22 floors above Berlin. The whiskey in my glass remained untouched as the city lights blurred beneath me. The bitter cold numbed my face, but my mind had never been clearer. You chose betrayal. Kim, I whispered to the night. Now I'll teach you the consequences of that choice. Back in my room, I searched our competitor databases for Miles Jernigan. Nothing. Not a single mention. I opened my laptop and composed an encrypted message to David Navarro, a former FBI agent who'd helped me navigate delicate situations in the past. I need you to track someone. Start with Kim's number. The hunt had begun. In situations like these, I've learned that the right people make all the difference. My response team had formed over years of business crises and personal challenges, each one handpicked for their discretion and ruthless competence. David Navarro, 41 ex-FBI, with connections that extended far beyond his government resume. He'd saved the Brazil acquisition in 2021 when a mid-level executive tried blackmailing me with fabricated evidence. David had traced the setup to its source within 48 hours. The blackmailer disappeared from the corporate world entirely. Henry Langton, my personal attorney, an old-school legal mind who spoke little but saw everything. Gray-haired wisdom wrapped in bespoke suits, he'd navigated Caldwell Holdings through every public relations nightmare with quiet, lethal precision. And Erica Sloan, My financial advisor with razor-sharp instincts, developed from her upbringing in a financially struggling immigrant household. She operated on one principle: no questions, just solutions. I'd never seen her rattled, not even during the 2020 market crash. I sent David everything I had. Kim's cell number, our home address, car license plate numbers, and her recent movement history pulled from our home security app. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same system Kim had insisted we install for safety was now tracking her betrayal. David's response was characteristically concise: "Give me 72 hours." While waiting, I focused on protecting my assets. Henry called with his initial findings. "The house hasn't been officially sold," he explained, his voice steady as always. "But it's been listed under co-ownership, with what appears to be a forged signature. I've pulled samples of your signature from recent filings for comparison." "Who's buying?" Query. "Private individual cash payment. No bank financing. The offer is 22% below market value. Suspicious for a property in that neighborhood, the transaction is being rushed through unusual channels. And the car, still in your name. The Lexus requires both signatures for transfer of ownership per your insurance policy. She can't legally sell it without consent." "Good. What's our move?" "I've initiated a hold on the property transactions citing suspected fraud, but discreetly. The other party won't know the real reason for the delay." Erica's update came next, clinical and precise. All joint accounts have been frozen. She reported, "Kim attempted 3 significant transfers after your Berlin call, all rejected. The system shows identity verification required as the reason, nothing that would appear targeted. Any unusual activity before I froze everything. One payment of $18,000 was attempted. I caught it just minutes before completion. The receiving account belongs to someone listed only as MJ in her contact list. Miles Jernigan." I said, the name bitter on my tongue. "Likely," Erica agreed. "I've flagged similar patterns for monitoring." 72 hours later, David's report arrived with surgical precision. Miles Jernigan was an alias. His real name, Reed Myers, subject of civil lawsuits in Texas, Florida, and Arizona. He had systematically seduced and swindled at least 5 women, extracting over $500,000 combined. Criminal charges never stuck due to insufficient evidence and victims unwilling to testify. He possessed multiple fake passports and had been traced to Mexico and Panama under the name Trevor Miles. A professional predator with a preference for vulnerable women with assets. He's living in your house now. David's report continued. Security footage shows him driving your Lexus regularly, wearing the Rolex you bought Kim for your 5th anniversary. The footage showed Miles moving through my home with practiced familiarity, using the fingerprint lock as if he'd been doing it for months. The realization that this stranger had been in my home, possibly while I was still there, sent an involuntary chill down my spine. David tracked their financial movements meticulously. Miles had begun using Kim's identity to apply for $8,000 personal loans from 3 different financial institutions. One had been approved, the money withdrawn from an ATM in Brooklyn, 2 blocks from our home. Most alarming, a cryptocurrency account had been opened under Kimberly Caldwell, with initial deposits that matched withdrawals from our previously joint accounts. Then came the unexpected twist. A former victim, Eva Santiago, contacted David after hearing Myers had resurfaced in New York. Same pattern. David reported he claimed to be going through a divorce, promised her a future baby house. The works then vanished with nearly $90,000 of her savings. Eva provided an audio recording of Myers speaking candidly to a male friend. "Women are only valuable if you know how to use them at the right time. When they've served their purpose, you move on." That evening, I stood in a crowded reception hall in Berlin, champagne glasses clinking as we celebrated finalizing the Argentel deal. While executives and lawyers exchanged pleasantries around me, I stared at my phone screen. The home security app showed Kim laughing in my living room, while a shirtless Miles poured himself a generous glass from my 23-year-old single malt, a bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. I felt no jealousy, only a strange fascination. She had no idea that everything she thought she possessed was merely an illusion I was carefully constructing. My phone vibrated with a final message from David. Aaron Miles is contacting another woman through a dating app. He's using your name. I smiled coldly at the screen. Perfect. Let him think he's winning. It was time to begin the psychological counterattack. While finalizing details of the Argentel acquisition, I crafted a deceptively simple text message to Kim. Berlin wrapping up soon. Hope everything at home is fine. No threats, no accusations, no mention of betrayal. Just 8 words calculated to plant a seed of doubt in her mind about how much I knew or didn't know. The ambiguity would be far more unsettling than any direct confrontation. Within an hour, David reported that Kim had checked her phone 17 times, made 4 calls to different numbers, and paced the length of our living room repeatedly. The security cameras captured her nervous energy perfectly. The first crack in her confidence had appeared. The financial vice began to tighten. Next, Kim attempted to withdraw cash from an ATM near our Brooklyn home transaction. Denied. My phone pinged with the automated alert from our banking app. She immediately called customer service, where a representative explained there was an identity verification issue affecting the account, apologized for the inconvenience, and promised it would be resolved within 3 to 5 business days. She's called 5 different banks today. David texted, each time more agitated than the last. She's starting to realize something's wrong. The real estate collapse came next. Kim contacted the listing agent handling our home sale, demanding an update on the closing timeline. The agent's response was perfectly orchestrated. Henry had ensured that there were unexpected legal complications with the title transfer. The buyer's attorney had flagged concerns about signature verification and proper ownership documentation. By afternoon, the potential buyer had withdrawn their offer entirely after receiving an anonymous tip about unresolved legal encumbrances on the property. Kim's real estate agent was suddenly unreachable. Meanwhile, Miles was becoming increasingly restless. David's surveillance captured him leaving our home at odd hours without explanation, returning late smelling of unfamiliar perfume. The security cameras I still controlled recorded a heated argument between them in the kitchen. Miles agitated about money not coming through and moving up the timeline. He's getting impatient, David reported. Yesterday he withdrew $200 from an ATM and immediately deposited it into an online account under the name Carlos Breyer at a digital bank headquartered in Delaware. He's creating his exit strategy. The footage showed Kim desperately trying to reassure him, promising to handle the house situation this week and figure out the bank delays. Miles responded with cold indifference, checking his phone throughout their conversation. Most revealing was David's discovery that Miles had already begun communicating with a woman named Madison through a dating app. He was using my name and photos, presenting himself as Aaron Caldwell's successful investment executive. He's setting up his next mark while still living off the current one. David observed, classic predator behavior. I executed the next phase remotely. Through my secured VPN, I accessed our home automation system and changed all security protocols. My fingerprint access was reset, and both Kim's and Miles's access permissions were quietly revoked. David installed additional hidden cameras in the garage, capturing Miles using my Lexus to pick up another woman while Kim was out desperately trying to resolve the banking glitch. The woman wasn't Madison from the dating app. This was someone new. Miles brought her into my home, into my bedroom. The footage was crystal clear, undeniable. He kissed her passionately against the wall where family photos once hung. I had the images professionally printed and placed in a plain manila envelope. No return address, no identifying information. Just the photos and a handwritten note. Everything you have is borrowed. David delivered it anonymously while Kim was alone. The security cameras captured her reaction in vivid detail, the shock, the disbelief giving way to rage. She threw objects across the room, screamed until her voice went hoarse, frantically called Miles 17 times in succession. He didn't answer a single call. By the time she finally reached him hours later, Miles had already begun implementing his exit plan. He returned to the house just long enough to pack his belongings and leave a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. Nothing left to stay for. Thanks for the house and accounts. Keep the baby for fun. He boarded a flight to Bogota the next morning using his Trevor Miles identity, carrying the bank card linked to the account in Kim's name. I placed a call to the airline security department reporting suspicious documentation, not to prevent his departure, but to ensure he understood that even in escape, he was being watched. Kim's collapse was total. No money, no friends betrayed twice over. The cameras captured her desperate attempts to contact former friends for loans. Most didn't respond. Those who did sent scathing messages somehow. Word of her betrayal had spread through our social circle. She was called the Queen of Betrayal and Miles' discarded toy in texts she read with trembling hands. In desperation, she called her mother a strict religious woman who had never fully approved of our marriage. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. Even with the sound muted, the body language told the story. Her mother's final words, according to David's report: "I raised you to be honest. Now bear the consequences." While Kim's world imploded, I attended the celebration dinner for the Berlin acquisition. Executives clinked champagne glasses. Photographers captured the historic handshake between companies, and financial analysts predicted market impacts. I stood in the corner, one hand in my pocket, the other, holding my phone as I watched the recording David had obtained. Miles calling Kim an expensive idiot to the woman he'd brought to our home. I forwarded the audio clip to Kim's phone from an anonymous number, no context needed. At 3:17 a.m., Berlin time. David called Aaron. His voice carried unusual concern. "Kim went to see a lawyer today, not to sue you. She's filing for bankruptcy." After 3 weeks in Berlin, finalizing every detail of the Argentel acquisition, I returned to New York. The plan had always been for Kim to meet me at JFK, back when we were still husband and wife, back before the betrayal. I hadn't expected her to actually show up. Yet there she was, standing beside a lighting pillar near baggage claim. This wasn't the polished, confident Kim I'd left behind. Her hair hung in unkempt tangles. Her clothes were wrinkled as if she'd slept in them for days, and dark circles hollowed her eyes. She swayed slightly unsteady on her feet. The moment she spotted me, she rushed forward, oblivious to the crowd of travelers around us. Her fingers clutched at my sleeve with desperate strength. "Aaron, please, I need to talk to you. What did you do to the accounts? The car? The house?" Her voice cracked, higher-pitched than I remembered. I gently removed her hand from my arm and looked directly into her eyes. "I didn't do anything. You did this to yourself." She collapsed to her knees in the middle of the terminal, surrounded by curious onlookers and the rhythmic announcements of departing flights. "I'm sorry, Aaron. It was a mistake." She sobbed, her words barely coherent. 2 airport security officers approached, concern evident in their professional stance. I gave them a slight nod. They understood immediately. This wasn't a security threat, just a personal drama. They helped Kim to her feet while maintaining a respectful distance. I turned and walked toward the exit without looking back, the sound of her sobs fading behind me. My driver waited with the car door open. I slid into the leather back seat and gave him the address of my new penthouse apartment, a place Kim knew nothing about, arranged remotely during my time in Berlin. Erica had messaged earlier. All asset transfer paperwork was prepared and awaiting Kim's signature to finalize our complete separation. The documents had been meticulously crafted to protect my interests while offering just enough to avoid a protracted legal battle neither of us could afford, especially Kim in her current financial state. 2 days later, I arranged our final meeting at a cafe on the 35th floor of a midtown high-rise. The location was strategic, public enough to discourage any outbursts filled with witnesses covered by security cameras, yet private enough in its exclusivity to keep gossip contained. I arrived early, selecting a corner table with clear sightlines to the entrance and elevator. I ordered an espresso and watched the city sprawl beneath me. Buildings like circuit boards, people like pixels, all connected in patterns most never recognized. Kim arrived 15 minutes late, wearing an old camel coat I didn't recognize. Her hands trembled visibly as she approached. The maitre d' escorted her to my table with professional detachment. She sat across from me, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. "Aaron, don't." I interrupted, raising my hand slightly. "There's nothing to explain. You don't understand. Miles tricked me," she pleaded. "I was weak. You were so distant these past 2 years. Always working. Always traveling." I didn't respond to her emotional appeal. Instead, I placed a black leather portfolio on the table between us and slid it toward her. "Open it." Inside was everything: financial documents bearing her forged signatures expertly analyzed by forensic handwriting specialists, credit applications with fraudulent information listing Kim as the legally responsible party, high-resolution photographs of Miles kissing another woman in our bedroom, federal investigation records on Miles's past activities, and at the very back, criminal complaint forms completed but unsigned. I had everything needed to initiate charges against her for financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. "I haven't filed these," I said quietly, "but I can." The color drained from her face as she slowly turned the pages, the magnitude of her situation sinking in with each document. Her shoulders slumped forward, and for the first time since I'd known her, Kim looked genuinely broken. "I have nothing left," she whispered, tears falling onto the damning papers. "I'm pregnant. If I go to jail, I'll die." I allowed the silence to stretch between us, watching her carefully. Finally, I spoke. "I'm offering you one way out. Sign these papers: complete termination, full asset, separation, no lawsuits, no further contact. If you violate any term, these criminal complaints will be filed the next morning." She signed each document with shaking hands, not bothering to read the fine print. When she reached the final page, her signature was barely legible. I collected the papers, returning them to the portfolio with methodical precision. "You didn't lose everything because you were betrayed, Kim. You lost everything because you thought you'd never get caught." I stood to leave. Kim grabbed my hand one last time, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine desperation. "Aaron, the baby, it's yours." I didn't respond. I simply withdrew my hand from hers and walked away, leaving her alone at the table with an untouched glass of water and the remnants of her failed manipulation. The elevator descended 35 floors in perfect silence. Outside, my driver opened the car door without a word. The city continued its perpetual motion around us, indifferent to the small drama that had just concluded. When I reached my new apartment, I checked my email on secure servers. Among the dozens of business messages was one from a private medical clinic I'd contacted weeks earlier. The subject line was clinical matter of fact: prenatal DNA test results. No match confirmed. With the final documents signed and Kim permanently removed from my life, I began the process of rebuilding not just my surroundings but myself. I completed the transfer of all assets within days. Henry's legal team worked with ruthless efficiency, ensuring every financial tie between Kim and me was severed completely. The house where we'd built our marriage and where she'd orchestrated its destruction was sold to a young tech executive for slightly above market value. I felt nothing watching the property transfer notification arrive in my inbox. My new residence was a penthouse on the 38th floor of a sleek glass tower in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Manhattan's skyline, a daily reminder of distance and perspective. I'd furnished it with deliberate minimalism, custom bookshelves filled with volumes I'd always meant to read, open spaces that welcomed natural light, a baby grand piano in the corner, and a small bar stocked with single malts I'd discovered during business trips abroad. Nothing from our shared past made the transition. Erica confirmed what I already knew. All personal assets, investments, and properties are completely separated. Kim has no legal claim to anything connected to you anymore. She paused before adding, "I've also placed monitoring alerts on your credit profile. If she attempts to use your name for loans or credit applications, you'll know immediately." Henry had handled the legal aftermath with the same meticulous attention he brought to corporate acquisitions. "She cannot use your name, likeness, or reputation in any capacity," he assured me. "The constraints are airtight and the penalties severe. She knows better than to test these boundaries." With my external world secured, I turned to rebuilding myself. I resumed my morning runs, not for physical conditioning as before, but to cleanse my mind. Each footfall on Brooklyn's pavements seemed to pound out the residual toxicity of betrayal. 5 miles by dawn became my ritual, watching the city awaken around me. Anonymous among early shift workers and other runners who nodded in wordless solidarity. I purchased a piano similar to the one my grandmother had taught me on as a child, a passion abandoned for business ambitions, and later a marriage that demanded conformity to expectations. Each evening I dedicated an hour to relearning Chopin's nocturnes. Fingers, stumbling at first, then gradually recovering their forgotten fluency. The discipline of practice became meditative, each improved phrase a small victory in reclaiming something authentic. Photography emerged as an unexpected outlet. I bought a professional-grade camera and spent weekends wandering the city's forgotten corners, capturing moments between strangers. Architectural details others overlooked the interplay of shadow and light across urban textures. Behind the lens, I was invisible, an observer, rather than a participant in the world's constant drama. While I reconstructed my personal life, my professional fortunes soared. The Berlin acquisition made the cover of Forbes with an accompanying profile naming me the strategic mind behind the global deal of the century. Investors who had watched the Argentel integration succeed beyond projections clamored to participate in Caldwell Holdings Series G funding. Round we closed at $700 million, transforming the company into a true multinational with offices now spanning 4 continents. Stanford Business School invited me to deliver their annual leadership lecture. I chose Building Strategy Through Personal Crisis as my topic, a coded reference to recent events that only I fully understood. The auditorium was packed, faces illuminated by the soft glow of my presentation slides as I explained how disruption forces innovation if properly channeled. 6 months after the cafe confrontation with Kim, I attended a charity gala benefiting foster children. Between auction bids and champagne, I found myself in conversation with Claire Whitlow, a 32-year-old writer with intelligent eyes and an unexpected laugh that seemed to surprise even her. She'd been a war correspondent in her 20s before transitioning to writing psychological fiction, exploring human resilience. Most refreshingly, she had no idea who I was, no preconceptions, no knowledge of my wealth or public profile, no interest in the trappings of corporate success. She'd attended the gala to research a character for her next novel. We discussed Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, arguing good-naturedly about translation nuances and philosophical interpretations. True rebirth isn't escaping suffering, she said, swirling amber liquid in her glass. It's walking straight through it, letting it transform you without destroying you. Something in her words resonated with experiences still too raw to articulate. We exchanged numbers without pretense or pressure. Our meetings became regular dinners, gallery openings, quiet walks through Central Park. No expectations, no agenda, no ghosts intruding from either past. Meanwhile, Kim faded from my world like a photograph left too long in sunlight. David occasionally updated me more from professional thoroughness than any request on my part. She'd relocated to a rundown apartment complex in suburban New Jersey, working retail at an imported accessories store for minimum wage. Her former social connections had evaporated, her invitations to charity functions and elite gatherings rescinded without explanation. Erica informed me that the 3 credit accounts Kim had opened were now in collections with civil lawsuits pending from 2 banks. She's radioactive in financial circles. Erica noted clinically, no one will touch her. The final chapter of the Miles saga arrived via encrypted message from David. Miles had been apprehended in Panama using falsified travel documents. The FBI had placed a flag on his aliases after one too many fraud complaints, crossed state lines, triggering federal jurisdiction. He faced investigations in 2 states and federal charges that carried minimum sentences measured in decades, not years. Most ironic was the civil lawsuit filed by one of his previous victims, naming Kim as co-defendant for acting as financial proxy. The legal documents formally alleged that she had knowingly or negligently facilitated financial fraud by allowing her identity to be used for criminal purposes. One evening, I stood on my penthouse balcony watching twilight settle over the city. A single glass of whiskey in hand, I found myself thinking of Kim, not with anger or pain or even satisfaction, but with something approaching indifference. Everything she had taken from me had been replaced with something more authentic. Everything she had thought to keep had slipped through her fingers like water. The doorman called up that evening about a delivery, a cream-colored envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Kim, along with a grainy ultrasound image. The final line read, "Aaron, if you still have a heart, save your child." I didn't respond to Kim's letter. Instead, I forwarded the ultrasound image along with a hair sample I'd preserved from when I had the apartment professionally cleaned after her departure to a specialized DNA testing facility. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her own abandoned strands would now confirm her final deception. 5 days later, the results arrived via secure courier, as expected. I was not the father of Kim's child. The scientific confirmation felt anticlimactic, like proving water is wet or gravity pulls downward. Some truths require no validation beyond intuition. I sent a copy of the results to Kim's attorney, a public defender, now handling her mounting legal troubles, with a brief note. This is the last time you'll use my name to manipulate anyone. From this moment forward, Aaron no longer exists in your life. David's reports on Kim's situation grew increasingly bleak. 3 banks had formally filed suit against her for fraudulent loan applications, seeking not only repayment, but punitive damages. The collection agencies had obtained court orders to garnish her already meager wages. Another of Miles's victims, this one from his Florida operation, had named Kim as co-conspirator in a civil lawsuit claiming she had knowingly abetted his fraudulent schemes. Without means to hire competent legal representation, Kim was navigating this maze of litigation with only overworked public defenders whose case files already spilled from their desks. She's on unofficial blacklists now. David reported, financial institutions, potential employers, even landlords are seeing red flags when her name appears in background checks. The circles are small in certain industries and word travels. Letters from Kim began arriving with increasing frequency. Handwritten pages, shifting wildly in tone from abject apology to hollow threats of legal action to desperate pleas for help. I didn't read beyond the first paragraph of any of them. My doorman had standing instructions to accept but not deliver such communications. They accumulated in a file maintained by my assistant, unopened and unacknowledged. Meanwhile, my relationship with Claire evolved with refreshing authenticity. Harvard Business Review ran a profile on me focusing on resilience and leadership, touching briefly on personal challenges I'd overcome. Claire read it over breakfast at my apartment one morning. There's a lot between the lines here, she said, setting down her coffee. Want to tell me the real story? That evening, I shared everything. The betrayal, the calculated response, the systematic dismantling of Kim's new life. I spoke without embellishment or justification, simply laying out the events as they had unfolded. When I finished, the silence between us felt weighted with judgment. I was prepared to accept. Claire took my hand across the table. You're not broken, Aaron. You're someone who knew how to rebuild himself. Her eyes held mine without flinching. That's rare and valuable. We didn't rush toward conventional milestones. Instead, we purchased a small cabin in Vermont, a weekend retreat where cell reception failed and city pressures faded. Between her writing deadlines and my corporate obligations, we carved out regular escapes there, learning each other's rhythms gradually and deliberately. The business world's perception of me shifted subtly during this period. What might have been seen as a personal failure, a marriage collapsed, a betrayal suffered, transformed in the retelling I received invitations to speak at corporate ethics, symposiums, financial publications cited my measured response to crisis as a case study in emotional intelligence under pressure. He didn't seek revenge through weapons, but through wisdom. Wrote one profile in The Economist. A Netflix documentary team approached about producing a short feature on the Berlin acquisition, and my personal resilience framing the parallel narratives as a modern business parable. Nearly a year after our confrontation at the cafe, a thick cream envelope arrived containing Kim's final letter, 11 handwritten pages of rambling text that veered between regret, nostalgia, anger, and longing. I read only the first paragraph before folding it away in a locked drawer in my home office, the sole remaining artifact of her existence in my life. That evening, I systematically blocked every remaining channel of communication, email filters, phone numbers, social media accounts, digitally erasing her from my present and future, with the same precision I'd used to reconstruct my life after her betrayal. Later that night, I stood on my balcony watching city lights illuminate the darkness. Claire joined me, pouring 2 glasses of Cabernet from a bottle we'd discovered on a weekend trip to a small Sonoma vineyard. "Do you ever think about the past anymore?" she asked, handing me a glass. I smiled, feeling the genuine warmth of the expression. "No, only about what I'm building now." Our glasses clinked softly, the crystal sound marking the final note of a nightmare concluded. Beyond the railing, New York stretched endlessly, a landscape of possibility. Kim had lost everything: career, money, dignity, reputation, friends, and ultimately herself. Miles sat in federal prison. His freedom revoked, his victims emboldened to come forward and claim justice. And I had not merely survived, but thrived, forging a stronger, more authentic life without the shadows of the past. Haunting my steps, I once owned everything, then lost it all in a single phone call. But I never lost myself, and that, in the final accounting, was the greatest victory of all.